On a warm morning of Guangzhou, I had the pleasure of interviewing Jens Eskelund, who just became the president of the European Chamber of China in May 2023, but have lived more than 26 years in China. He told me that it was his privilege to come to China in the late 90s for being a witness and participator of China's transformative development of these years. However, the world today is in flux. On October 4th, the European Union members voted to impose high tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Faced with the rising trade protectionism and the slowdown of the global economy, what potential development will European enterprises have in China? How to further boost the international business and cooperation? We had a deep conversation afterwards. Thank you, Jens, for accepting our interview today. My first question will be, coming to the fourth quarter of 2024, how would you say about the overall development of the European enterprises in China?
I think European companies in China find themselves very much in the same situation as many Chinese companies. We share the same fundamental conditions in the Chinese market, and that is, of course, also reflected in the performance of European businesses. What that means in more concrete terms is that we have seen, due in particular to what we have seen now, 24 consecutive months of producer price deflation, that our member companies are getting squeezed on their profits. But I think it's important for me also to say that European companies, they're not running for the exit. I mean, European companies are very committed to China. We continue to see significant potential for many of our companies, many of our members to grow on the Chinese market. But I think also there's no denying that the past 18 months have been very difficult for many of our members, and also that we expect that in the near term that it's going to continue to be hard for many industries. And that's of course where it's important when you have announcements being made like the Ministry of Finance last Saturday, that there will be initiatives, fiscal initiatives, to try to stimulate demand, because in the opinion of many of our members, that's exactly what China needs right now. That is sort of a confidence boost, a demand boost that allow some of these healthy dynamics to get reestablished on the Chinese market.
What are some areas that is becoming more and more profitable for the European enterprises that is growing in China? Maybe they paying more attention to?
I think you'll always be able to find pockets where companies are profitable, in particular when you are in niche sector. But everything that is sort of a commodity style product, everything that can get scaled, everything where you have significant competition, and that is the vast majority of our members, we actually see sort of a sliding profitability. But products where you are at the very cutting edge, areas where perhaps that you have a unique position in the market, that would typically be industries where you still have good opportunities for profitable growth. But we don't think it's enough. We think that there needs to be sort of a broader foundation that will enable more companies, Chinese and foreign, to grow. And that's of course what we hope to see in terms of these announcements that were made, that we are going to see fiscal initiatives in the near future.
Yeah, so you already mentioned that the government has already taken a lot of measures for the helping the foreign enterprises growing in China. And also, I think you once mentioned that the European enterprises have also actively participated into the promotion of the large-scale equipment renewable and the trade-in of the consumer goods.
Yes.
So could you tell me more about how the foreign enterprises participating into such activity?
We are trying wherever we can to engage with the government to understand exactly how these initiatives, like replacement of equipment or replacement of household goods, that this can benefit European companies. We are supporting any measure that can help to sort of stimulate demand. We could be a little bit concerned if some of this actually means that you can, replace old equipment and you get a subsidy to get more efficient new equipment that can produce even more, because what we need right now is not necessarily a lot of more product. What we need is more demand. And of course, if there is a rapidly growing demand, then we can also look at growing supply. But right now, it's about sort of restoring a healthy supply and demand balance that will allow everyone to develop and have reasonable margins on the Chinese market.
So I saw that according to the position paper, there is a concern of the European enterprises' confidence in investing in Chinese market. So what else measures or actions could the government take to further boost the confidence of the European companies?
A big one right now for European companies is access to public procurement in China. In Europe, for example, Chinese companies, they have access to public procurement. That is part of Europe's commitment to the WTO. But China has actually not signed up to that part of WTO where foreign companies have access to public procurement in China. In particular, in China, public procurement is a very, very big part of consumption. So that's a big one for many European companies.
So does the digital transformations and the growing of the AI and such new technologies in China giving more and more opportunities for European companies?
Yes and no. I think we can all agree that there is a very, very significant potential in AI. But what worries us a little bit is that we are beginning to see developments where you have sort of a China ecosystem for digitalization and AI, and you have a rest of world ecosystem for AI and digitalization. We would hope that these in due time also can become areas where foreign companies can participate. And I think ICT in general is one of these areas.
But Chinese government has already trying to make the level of opening up be open more and more. Do you think there is a possibility of more and more opening up in the future?
I hope so, but I think again digitalization and AI, which we agree is one of the most promising areas. We hope, we would encourage, and it would be great. So let's see.
On October 1st, the EU voted to impose the high tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. So what impact will this bring to the European enterprises investing in China?
Yeah. First of all, I think it's interesting to note when you look at the tariffs. I think the ones that got the lowest tariffs, that's actually an American company. The second lowest, I think, you had two Chinese companies, BYD and Geely. I think they have lower tariff than the European one. So I think you can say that this is not something that is specifically targeting Chinese companies. It maybe targets industrial policy in China, but not individual Chinese companies. I think you can say that some Chinese companies, that's a fact. I mean, they had lower tariff levels than European companies. We are not really fond of tariffs, but we also recognize that there are situations, as described in the WTO, where it might be useful, or not useful, where it might be justified to do it. We of course hope that you can find solutions so it's not necessary, because we do believe in free trade. But I think we spend too much time talking about the EV tariffs. Chinese exports to Europe are growing by leaps and bounds. In the first 7 months, in container terms, Chinese exports to Europe grew by 11%. That's very, very high, considering that the European economy is basically not growing. But Chinese exports grew by 11%. By contrast, Chinese imports from Europe in container terms declined by 5%. And if you look at it over a 6-year period, going back to 2017, maybe the Chinese economy has grown 40% since 2017, right? But Chinese container imports from Europe, manufactured goods, is down by 30%. How's that possible? Now, every time Europe export 1 container to China, China is exporting 4 containers to Europe. So I think China's export to Europe are doing very, very fine. I think Chinese imports from Europe are not doing so fine. And maybe we should spend a little bit more time considering how is it that Chinese goods cannot get into the Chinese market.
The fearing thing is that will there be a possibility for the EU to increasing the trade barriers in some other areas in the futures with China, and the trade protectionism become more and more? Would that be something we are afraid of?
I have no doubt that's the way it's going to go unless something changes, right? But we also think that if the two sides do not really seriously think about, what should the future trading relationship look like? Is there something we need to do in terms of sort of ensuring that the benefits of globalization are, being distributed in a more equitable manner, right? What should the future modus operandi of trade be? Because, if you look at it historically, the trading relationship between the European Union and China has created enormous value for China and for Europe, for everyone. It has been undisputedly a good thing, and we think there's a very significant future potential for value creation also. But we need to look at the way things are today. There are some imbalances that we really need to fix. Let's sit down, acknowledge the issues, and then see if we can force a way forward. I don't buy into this that it's impossible and things will need to go worse. I think it'll be difficult, and I think that unless we do something, we will have more problems. So I think we have a responsibility, all of us, to try to consider, how can we build trust? How can we honestly discuss the issues that we have? How can we try to find a way forward?
So we know that the European politics has been some shifted and some unexpected election outcomes. So I'm curious that do you think the changes of the politics will, how will it influence the Sino-European trade relations?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether they have been unexpected. I think we are used to in Europe that when you have elections, that sometimes things may not exactly play out the way that you have you had expected. But I don't think that we have seen sort of a very big changes as a consequence of the election. I think there are things changing in Europe that sort of cuts across, I think, politics, and that is sort of a concern about the industrial future of Europe. And I think we saw here a few months ago the publication of the so-called Draghi report that talk about how can you restore European competitiveness. And I think that's where the discussion is going now. And I'm just back from Europe, and my perception is that there is actually a broad consensus that you need to think much more systematic about how you restore European competitiveness. And I think that's, of course, one component of it, because yes, there's a lot of stuff that Europe needs to do itself to become more competitive, because part of the reason that Europe is importing so much is that because Europe is not as competitive as it used to be. The part, of course, is also what should our trade partners here under China be doing to make sure that we are trading on fair and equal terms. So I think we are in for some changes. I think there is a mindset change in Europe in many ways. I think there are new discussions popping up. I think it's healthy, because if we don't think, then I'm sure that we're in for more trouble. But again, I think if we really apply ourselves, that we'll also be able to find solutions.
So as an entrepreneur, how would you think the enterprises can maintain or strengthen the international cooperation under such context of trade protectionism?
I think actually that it's one of the most important tasks that we have, because through our more than 1,700 member companies, we have access to a fantastic source of very granular information. And we think it's very important that we are sharing this information with regulators, with governments in China, but also in Europe. So whenever you're having these discussions, they're being taken on an absolute factual basis. We think it's only if you have this, fact-based, reliable, factual base that you'll be able to actually make solutions that work for both China and Europe. So that is what we can contribute. That is that we can provide, industry by industry perspective on, how's it going here in China? What are the challenges we face? What are the recommendations?
Overall, how do you think the business environment that is has been changing in Chinese market for the foreign enterprises? And according to the position paper, there are more than 1,000 recommendations. Or what advice would you give to maybe what actions can the government take to boost the further confidence?
I think it's important to emphasize that these 1,000 recommendations are intended as constructive input from our 50 individual working groups. We have 50 industrial working groups who have been looking at what needs to happen. What do we suggest in order to improve on the investment environment, to improve on the business conditions in all this variety. So, please see this as our honest, constructive suggestions, industry by industry, to what we think can be done better. I think what the particular challenge is that we continue to have a lot of the long-standing issues Why should I invest here if I have perhaps better terms? I can make more money in other countries. So I think we really need to work together to find ways that we sort of restore the confidence in the market here and develop sort of the basic foundation that allows for profitable growth going forward.
Okay, so since we are standing here at the Greater Bay Areas, so how do you think the overall development of the GBA right now? Because you just told me that MSK built like 4 big ships in Nansha, right? So how do you think?
No, 40.
40. Sorry.
Historically.
Sorry, my fault. MSK had built 40 ships at Nansha. So how do you think the future of the Greater Bay Areas, what opportunities will it bring to the foreign enterprises? Maybe some new chances here.
Yeah, I think this is one of the really great and exciting clusters that we see here, and we have seen how in other locations, whether it's in California, in the Bay Area there, or it's in the Tokyo Bay and so on, that how powerful drivers, big clusters, population, industrial research clusters like the GBA can be sort of really engines for economic growth and innovation. So we think it's absolutely the right thing to do in terms of thinking about it as one integrated cluster. We think it's important that you continue to consider about how do you create the conditions that makes the GBA competitive, not just relative to other places in China, but globally competitive. You have a lot of other places in Asia that is also, competing for the best talent in the world. What is it that you do? For example, tax regulations, quality of life, all these things that make people who actually have a choice where they want to live and work, right? How do you make sure that they come to the GBA, right? And of course, we are very happy to engage in that discussion and help benchmarking against some of the other leading locations in the world. But we think that the concept of the GBA, many of the plans, is something that for our members create a lot of excitement.
Okay, one last question. Since you have been living here for 26 years, if I ask you, tell me one impressive Chinese stories, what would you think about?
Oh, I think there are many to think about. When I came to China, I think there were 200,000 cars in Beijing, and the 4th ring was not constructed yet. Now I think we are close to somewhere between 5 and 6 million cars, and it is just completely transformed. I would actually be hard pressed to single out one, but one thing is for sure that. I do think personally it has been a privilege to be in China during that period from the late 90s and then until now. I think it has been transformative for China. Mm-hmm. I don't think that China has never seen anything like it. I think it has been transformative for the world. China joined the WTO on the 12th of December 2001. And the way that single event has transformed the way that the world engaged with each other, the way China has emerged from being quite sort of a secondary trading nation to being the absolute leader in global trade. This, vast integration of everything in the world, for me has been just a fantastic journey. I hope the journey continues, and I'm looking forward to my next 26 years in China.
Thank you so much for accepting our interview.
Thanks for having me.